We have sent humans into orbit for over 60 years. We trained them, tested them, wired them into machines that measure every heartbeat. These are the calmest, most rational eyes we own. And yet, one by one, they have come back describing things that should not be there. Glowing figures. Music where no music can travel, a presence sitting beside them in the dark. Official reports exist. Names, missions, dates. Some were explained decades later. Some never were. And the very first case begins with the first American in orbit, staring at something no one on Earth could identify. Subscribe and let's open the transcripts. February 20th, 1962. John Glenn is strapped inside Friendship 7, the tiny Mercury capsule barely wider than his shoulders. He is the first American to orbit the Earth. As the sun rises over the Pacific, he glances out the window and freezes. The capsule is surrounded. Thousands of tiny luminous particles drifting past like a slow snowstorm made of light. He calls them fireflies. Mission Control has no idea what he is describing. Years later, engineers traced the effect to ice flakes shedding off the hull, warm by sunrise. A clean, dry answer. But sit for a moment inside that capsule with him. The first man from his country to circle the world, and something outside his window is glowing back at him. And Glenn's fireflies would not be the last light in space that refused to make sense. For decades, pilots and astronauts kept reporting the same impossible thing. Brief flashes of red light shooting upward above thunderstorms, blue jets stabbing into the upper atmosphere. Lightning is supposed to go down into the ground. These went up, into space. Meteorologists dismissed the reports for most of the 20th century. The physics of the time did not allow it. Then in 1989, a University of Minnesota team accidentally caught one on a low-light camera. Red sprites, real, enormous. Some over 90 kilometers tall, unfolding in milliseconds above storms. Blue jets followed, then elves, halos, gigantic jets, a whole hidden weather system in the sky above our sky. Trained observers had been telling the truth for 50 years, and no one believed them. But if the atmosphere can hide something that big, what else might a human eye catch that instruments miss? Ask any astronaut who has done a spacewalk what space smells like. They will pause and then use the same words. Burnt steak, hot metal, welded iron, ozone. The scent clings to the suit as they come back through the airlock strong enough that crewmates comment on it. Don Pettit, Chris Hadfield, Thomas Jones, they all describe the same thing. But space is a vacuum. There is nothing there to smell. So, where does the odor come from? Scientists still argue. Some blame dying stars seeding the solar system with polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, complex burnt carbon molecules created in supernova. Others suspect atomic oxygen reacting with the suit fabric. Nobody has a final answer. The seared steak smell of the universe is real, documented, and unexplained. And it is not the only signal your body picks up out there that no one can fully explain. Apollo 11. On the way to the moon, Buzz Aldrin closes his eyes to rest and sees flashes of light. Not from the window, inside his eyes. He is not the only one. Every Apollo crew reports it. Streaks, points, little worms of light in total darkness. NASA takes it seriously enough to run a dedicated experiment. ALFMED, worn like a helmet on Apollo 16 and 17. The cause turns out to be cosmic rays, single high-energy particles from distant supernovae punching straight through the aluminum hull, through the astronaut's skull, through the eyeball itself, and triggering the retina and possibly the visual cortex on the way. Right now on the International Space Station, crews still report them. And scientists are still asking a quiet, unsettling question. What does it do to a human brain over months to be hit by exploding stars? May 15, 1963, Mercury astronaut Gordon Cooper is on the final orbit of Faith 7, the last solo Mercury flight. As he passes over Australia, he reports a glowing greenish object approaching his capsule. It moves, changes direction, and disappears. According to later interviews, the tracking station at Muchea also registers something on radar. NASA's official position over the years has been careful and quiet. Cooper himself gave slightly different versions in later decades, and no official radar record has ever been publicly released. But Cooper, a decorated test pilot, one of the original Mercury 7, insisted for the rest of his life that he saw craft in the sky he could not explain. Draw whatever conclusion you like. The point is this: the man America trusted to fly alone in orbit died believing he was not alone up there. And a shuttle camera would later record something even harder to dismiss. September 15th, 1991. Space Shuttle Discovery. Mission STS-48. A payload bay camera is quietly filming the limb of the Earth. Suddenly, a bright point of light drifts slowly across the frame, and then, in an instant, changes direction at a sharp angle as a streak flashes past where it had just been. NASA's explanation was straightforward. Ice particles near the shuttle disturbed by a thruster firing. Physically consistent, mathematically possible. And yet, more than 30 years later, the clip is still shown in every discussion of unexplained orbital footage. Researchers like the late James Oberg defended the ice hypothesis in detail. Others counted the pixels and said the geometry never quite worked. The truth is, we have grainy video, an official answer, and a stubborn feeling that something is off. And in 1969, 3 men on their way to the moon had exactly the same feeling. July 1969, Apollo 11 is coasting toward the moon. Somewhere behind them, they notice an object. It seems to be pacing them. Sometimes it looks like an L, sometimes like a bright line. Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, and Michael Collins discuss it privately, and only decades later does Aldrin talk openly about it. The official explanation is that they were seeing one of the 4 panels that had separated from the Saturn V's upper stage, drifting in a similar trajectory and catching sunlight. Aldrin himself has said that this is probably what it was. And yet, in his own words, it did not look like what they expected. 3 men, arguably the most closely watched humans in history, saw something on the way to another world and could not quite name it. And then, once they got there, the radios did something even stranger. May 1969. Apollo 10, the dress rehearsal for the moon landing. Astronauts Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan swing around the far side of the moon. For about an hour, they are cut off from Earth by 3,400 kilometers of rock. And their radio starts making a sound, a strange, whistling, almost musical tone. On the recovered tapes, you can hear them talking about it. Unsettled, half joking, half serious. One of them says it sounds like outer space music. They discuss whether to even mention it back on Earth. The transcript was quietly filed and only declassified in 2008. NASA engineers later blamed radio interference between the command module and lunar module VHF systems. A perfectly reasonable explanation, but for 1 hour, 3 of the best pilots alive sat in the deepest silence humans have ever known and heard something singing. It has a name in psychology, the third man factor. On the longest, loneliest, most extreme missions humans undertake, polar treks, high-altitude climbs, deep-sea dives, long space flights, people report the same thing, a calm, unseen presence beside them. Not menacing, not speaking usually, just there. Ernest Shackleton described it on his 1916 crossing of South Georgia. Reinhold Messner on Everest. Astronauts have quietly described versions of it too, on long stays aboard Mir and the ISS. Neurologists suspect it is the brain, under extreme stress, exhaustion, and isolation, generating a companion to keep the self stable. Others go further and simply refuse to explain it. It is so consistent across cultures, centuries, and environments that it now has its own scientific literature. Something in the human mind, when pushed to the edge, reaches out and finds a friend. And on one Soviet space station, that friend appeared to 7 people at once. July 12, 1985. Aboard Soviet space station Salyut 7, cosmonauts Vladimir Solovyov, Oleg Atkov, and Leonid Kazim are on day 155 of their mission. According to accounts later published by Soviet space officials, the station is suddenly bathed in a brilliant orange light. They rush to the windows. Outside, they report, are 7 enormous, glowing, human-like figures, faces serene, wings-like structures behind them, pacing the station and, in their own description, smiling in. The vision lasts about 10 minutes and vanishes. 12 days later, a second crew arrives. Vladimir Janibekov, Svetlana Savitskaya, and Igor Volk. And according to the same accounts, they see exactly the same thing. 7 figures. Same smile, then gone. Doctors on the ground suggested carbon dioxide buildup, oxygen imbalance, exhaustion, shared hallucination. None of it was ever proven. 6 trained cosmonauts, 2 independent sightings. One story that the Soviet space program never fully closed. 10 sightings. Some solved, some half-solved, some still open on the desks of investigators. The strangest part is not the fireflies, or the music, or the angels. The strangest part is who saw them. Not dreamers, not storytellers. Pilots, engineers, physicists, the most tested minds we have ever put in a machine. Space is not empty. It is full of things our instruments cannot yet name, and eyes that keep reporting them anyway. Which of these 10 unsettled you the most, and which one do you think we will finally explain first? Tell us in the comments.